All right, greetings. My name is Monique Norfolk, and I am honored to be here in partnership with the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization. I will talk a little bit later. I'm going to actually turn it over to our fearless leader, Dion, to kind of do some welcome and introductions, and then Linda, and then they'll bring me back in.
All right. Are we sharing the screen, the PowerPoint? Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. I'm Dion Ferguson and the president of the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization. And we are delighted that you are here to join us this morning. And really happy that we're able to provide this offering for you and for our community of nonprofit organizations that are doing good work for the city of St. Louis residents. So thank you for joining us. All right. Yes. So I'm going to give you a little bit of the history of the organization. St. Louis Philanthropic Organization was started in 1984 as a result of a lawsuit against a cable company here in St. Louis. And so the funds that were awarded from that lawsuit then became what was used by the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization to fund good work and beneficial work for St. Louis city residents. Currently, we're governed by a board of directors that's comprised of 8 community volunteers. Got it right, yes, 8 community volunteers. So we give up our time, we are not paid. We have our meetings, and our main purpose is to manage this fund and to fund and give grants to organizations, again, that are doing work for St. Louis City residents. That is our main function as board of directors. Since 1984, we've allocated more than $9 million. And because of the board's, since 1984, the board's management of this fund, we are able to continue to allocate funds each year. So that is one of the things that we are very proud of, is managing the fund well so that we can continue to provide funds to organizations to do good work in our city. You can see our mission statement here. I'll read it really quickly though. The St. Louis Philanthropic Organization Incorporated provides funding and capacity building to nonprofit organizations whose programs and services advance the quality of life for St. Louis City residents. So what you are experiencing now is a part of that capacity building that we're doing. We have 6 guiding principles. We'll run through them very quickly. Impact focused. As the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization and board, we are focused on the impact. So the work that we do, the decisions that we make, we want to make sure that those are impactful to our community. Additionally, we also want to ensure that the organizations that we are funding are also impacting our community positively. We are community oriented. Our focus is on residents in the city of St. Louis. This is the community that we are focused on and oriented to serve. And we want to ensure that those that we fund are the same and are very considerate in their program design, in their planning, very considerate of the community that they're serving. Commitment, we're very committed, as we said earlier, unpaid. So we're very committed to the work that we're doing. And our expectation is that those that we fund are also, and that will come through not only through your application, but also your continued work. Accountability. As the managers of a significant fund, We hold ourselves accountable for managing that fund and accountable for who we provide funding for, the grants for, to do the work. So we hold ourselves accountable, and through our process, we also hold the organizations that we fund, that we grant funding to, accountable for their work in benefiting City of St. Louis residents. Racial equity is also important to us. We know that we are in a city, in a region where life expectancy, lifestyle, how people live is determined by zip codes, but also by what comes along with those zip codes. And so it's important for us to hold up racial equity, and that we are thinking about racial equity and being equitable in how we disperse the funds that we are managing, but also that as organizations that are working in our city and for St. Louis City residents, that you are also focusing on racial equity. Finally, respect. I don't know. That's pretty self-explanatory. You know, we, in all that we do, we want to be respectful in how we operate as the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization with one another. We are respectful, and we expect that we will, and our intent is to be respectful with you and the community that we're all serving. All right, so 2023 responsive grants. The grants allow for you to, organizations to apply for up to $10,000. We will not provide funding or grants for applications that request more than $10,000. We do have quite a few organizations to apply for these grants. And so oftentimes we find ourselves figuring out how to best fund those that meet the criteria. So there are some that receive 10,000. Sometimes it's less than 10,000. And so there is a question on the application where we ask you, if you received less, what that amount would be, so that you could continue to do the work that you are planning to do for St. Louis City residents. So please be thoughtful about that question. The programs and services that organizations who receive funding from the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization must support St. Louis City residents. It does not mean that your organization has to be located in the city of St. Louis. It does not mean that your organization is not also serving residents outside of the city of St. Louis. What it means is the funding that you receive from the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization must serve City of St. Louis residents. And again, we are looking favorably on programs and services that promote racial equity. All right. I am not going to go through all of this, but these are all of the requirements of the application. So your proposal must include all of these. Please do remember to sign the application. Yeah, please make sure that you have all of these components as a part of your application. And you'll find this on the website too, on our website. So no need to take a snapshot of this or anything. You'll find the information pretty well detailed on the application and on the website. So as we are looking at your proposals, we are looking to ensure that they are aligned with our mission, that your proposal intends to have an effect on our targeted population of the City of St. Louis residents, and that you have stayed within the maximum grant request amount of $10,000. We're looking to ensure that the application is completed and all of the attachments are there, and that you specifically, the one that often sometimes people forget is the certificate of good standing, so that you have that included, and that you are a 501c3 organization, or you have a fiscal agent who is 501c3. In addition, if you have received grant funding from us before, it is essential that you are in good standing with the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization, which means that you've turned in your reports for past work. If your organization has received a responsive grant for 2 consecutive years, I believe this should say 2021 and 2022, right? All right. So if you've received your responsive grant for the past 2 years, 2021 and 2022, then you are not eligible for funding in 2023. You will need to wait until 2024 to apply. And again, it's the guidelines and eligibility criteria. We are looking to see that you're promoting racial equity. All right, so we are asking that you submit your applications and required documentation by February 3rd, 2023. 4:30 p.m. is the latest time. And this is a hard copy. That hasn't changed, has it? All right, so we're asking for, is it just 1 copy, Linda?
Good morning. We need 3 copies total. So the original plus 2 copies and only 1 set of the required documentation.
All right, thank you, Linda. And we do our best to make this a quick turnaround process. So there are 8 of us. Typically, we have more than 100 applications. So you have 8 people reviewing 100 applications. And so, but we do make sure that we have completed this process by late April. And so that you will get a notification if you are one of the awarded recipients. And as soon as you submit your grant acceptance letter, you will receive a check. Below, you can see the hours, the days and hours that the support staff, which is Linda H., is in the office and available to answer any questions. That's Mondays and Thursdays from 8:30 to 4:30 and Fridays 8:30 to 12:30. I strongly suggest that if you have questions, contact her by email, by phone, and I think that will be on the next slide. Yep, there's the email, there's the phone number. That's the location of our office so that you can drop off your proposal. If you are mailing your proposal, the date is February 3rd. That means it needs to be in the office by February 3rd, not postmarked. It needs to be in the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization's hands by February 3rd, 4:30 p.m. And I believe that is it. We do want to say thank you to Monique and Mosaic Beginnings for all of the work and preparation that you've done for this workshop. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you all and welcome again.
Thank you so much, Dion. As always, I just love how you lead and just your heart. And Linda is absolutely amazing. So I do want to say ask those questions as early as possible. Don't ask, right at the last minute, you guys. Please ask as soon as possible. And Linda, before I jump in, is there anything else that you'd like to add or share?
No, I will only say that if you call, just know that I will be, from this moment forward, forwarding the office phone to my cell phone, so I'll still get it even if I'm not in the office. And I'll also be checking email when I'm not in the office once the grant season's open. So even if I'm not in the office on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I'll still be able to pull up your email and respond to you, hopefully in a timely manner. And again, welcome and thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. She is a wealth of information and knowledge and just a really supportive person. So really, take her up on that moving forward. And I want to acknowledge Darian, who works with the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization, for being here and providing support as well. So we're going to go ahead and jump in. Again, I'm Monique Norfolk, and my firm is Mosaic Beginnings. I'm honored that the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization saw it beneficial enough to work with my firm again. And thank you all for, when you registered, providing some really great insight and information. I'll pull that up in just a moment because we are now into the capacity building aspect of this. I want to stress that the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization, as Dion said, is really committed to building the capacity of organizations that are serving our community, as well as the individuals that are within those organizations. And so while we are utilizing the outline of all of those things that are required for this particular funding opportunity, that's guiding us, we are also giving you a wealth of information that you can utilize to apply for other funding opportunities, build out your infrastructure, enhance your program, and all of that. So that's what I love about them, is that yes, there's this funding opportunity, but what they want most is to make sure that you all have all of the skills and supports and resources to be successful. And I do want to say that I saw a lot of familiar faces join, so I'm super excited. I thank all of you for being here. This is going to be very interactive, so please be involved. If you can, have your cameras on. Love to see your faces when I can, and I love for you guys to see each other. It just creates that sense of community. It's not a requirement though. Please use the raise your hand feature or the chat box to ask questions. You do not have to wait for any point in time. I'm going to try to do my best to take a pause, ask for input, but please step in at any time. I don't mind you cutting me off. It's not a bad thing. Ask it while it's on your mind. Someone else might be thinking it. And I know that Linda is supporting me in making sure that she's looking and seeing if people have any questions and all of that. So that's really helpful. And then please remain muted. I love your voices and everything, but that keeps people from hearing information that's being shared, and it keeps us from being able to hear one another when other people are speaking. So again, thanks for being here. They, already have shared, kind of the agenda. This is just more the plan of the day for this section, but it does not include everything. There's a lot of information here. I want you all to know that. It's jam-packed in our short period of time. I will be respectful and mindful of the time, but also know this is your session. It really is. So while there's a lot of information here, and I do plan to cover those things that I promised I would cover, I want you to know that if you feel like, hey, I really want to ask this burning question, I have this concern or challenge, and this is a space for me to bring this up, bring it up. As long as it relates to the work that we're doing here, bring that up. And this is your support system. So just want you to know that if we need to skip to a slide that's further down, I will do that. Just make it your own. So, and there are some things that we have covered in previous sessions. And so I will, for a few of these, reference the fact that this is covered in a prior workshop, and all of that information is available on their website, because I do want to make sure we acknowledge the newer information you all have requested, while letting you know that you're not going to miss out on anything, because all of that is available to you. So I'm not going to go through all of these. These are just the learning objectives that were there when you all registered for the workshop. I wanted you to know that I saw that. We're adhering to that. And so a lot of what you see here, even if we don't call it out as this particular thing, it will be covered throughout the presentation. So based on all the responses that you all provided, there was a lot of wonderful feedback. There's some things that came up. Some were very unique and some came up multiple times. And so I wanted to call them out. As you can see, there are some people who are like, I've never written a grant before. I don't have any formal training. There were also people that were experts. So what you'll see throughout this workshop is that it's going to be some information you already know if you've been doing this for a while, but there's also information for people, this is their first time. We wanted to try to make sure we cross the entire gamut. So as my team processes things behind the scenes to develop this, we're thinking about all the different aspects. And the funding landscape has changed a lot, over this, last couple of years as we've been in the pandemic. Disparities have been highlighted. We're looking at that. And I know that in case you guys didn't get it, racial equity is really important. And so that is something that we really are going to highlight later on, what that looks like when we're intentional about it, not just, naming it, not just saying we're putting Black people in this space and that's enough. We really need to go deeper. And I did see that some people shared that, wanting equal access for all. And that is definitely something that's very important. I will say that here in St. Louis, being the 10th most segregated city in the country, Black and brown people are the ones that are the most impacted, and that will be the focus. So that's just the way it is. It's unfortunate. We wish it wasn't that way, but since it is, that's where our focus will be. I do want to call out a couple of things. Like I know unrestricted funding was a really huge concern, and that's always been a concern. I'm sure even more so now, but that's few and far between, I'll be honest. Some of it's going to go into, it's important to have a strong fundraising plan. So I want to at least acknowledge that, and that's going to be multifaceted. And I think that's a conversation probably for another time, but I want you all to know that that's something to consider. Also, what I do want to say is when you're going after different funding opportunities, there is often, not always, the opportunity to provide indirect costs as part of your budget. Usually it's 10%. So when that is an option, I definitely recommend that. And then also there are some funding opportunities that allow for you to include a portion of staff time as well. So though that doesn't get totally at unrestricted funding, it does give you other opportunities to make sure you're supporting your operating costs. And then one question that also came up that is a little outside of some of what we would talk about is like selecting whether you go after programming funding or operational funds. That's going to honestly depend on what's available. Again, operational funds are not something that's just readily available, but focusing on the right fundraising plan for your organization to generate those funds is essential. And that may be individual donors. There may be specific organizations that have an affinity for the type of work that you do. And so tapping into that is important, but that literally takes like a real defined approach and working with someone who understands your community and your organization. And then one more thing is the changes in the economy. I'm not exactly sure what that meant, but I don't know what that specific person meant, but I do know that with us having been in a pandemic for almost 3 years now, the economy has changed in so many ways. And so funding has shifted to support different areas now. I also recognize that it's impacted, ability to, maintain, different positions that for people to even be interested in being employed. Honestly, that's a huge issue. And programming has looked different because how we need to serve our community is different. So we do want to take all of that into account. But again, that's going to be, I think, more on an individualized organizational basis that we probably can't cover here, but it's definitely worth kind of processing a conversation around that. So I wanted to just pause real quick, because even though I gathered that information from the surveys, I just want to ask if there is anything else that you all are seeing or thinking about that you didn't see on that list, so that if I can weave that into this, I do that. So if you would raise your hand or just unmute and share, that would be helpful. I know that I can't see anything, Linda, so just let me know if you see someone. It looks like we're good this far, I think. Okay, so with that being the case, I'll continue through, but again, please feel free to jump in at any time. I don't want to just talk at you. And if you have experience and I share something and you have additional information to share, I am very open to that. So just know this is not just the Monique show. Other people have expertise as well. All right, so let's get going. So that's the proposal summary, all of the different pieces that are required. And we will touch on a lot of information that will hopefully support you as you develop this proposal and others. So avoiding common pitfalls. This is not an exhaustive list, but I definitely wanted to bring this up as something that we see as our team is working with different organizations, no matter their size or how long they've been in existence. It's really, not using best practices. So I saw that one concern was about being competitive. It is a competitive field. It really is. It wasn't like that back when I started in 2006, but now it is. This, you have to be able to align with best practices. We'll at least look at one through this presentation, and I'll be able to kind of share with you how this would be applied to a proposal. But that is something that's going to help, instead of it just being an opinion or a thought. We often know what's going on in our community and what the needs are, but we have to be able to convey that to a funder, because why should they give our organization funding over another if they don't know that there's really a great need and we're following something that's proven to work or is considering even a promising practice. So evaluation is critical. That's hopefully everyone's already doing that. If not, it's important to do that. It's going to look different for each organization. We'll cover that a little bit, but we do have a workshop that we provided previously, and that does go through some of those components and things that you should consider. And so definitely, again, that's on their website, and there are different videos there. There's different templates. So there's a lot of resources that are available to you because the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization has made that possible. Make sure the reviewer feels like they're right there in your community. So telling the story is huge. I know some people are like, hey, I've never done this before. Honestly, there are people who are grant writers and have been for a long time that don't know how to tell the story. So don't let that deter you. It's really about making sure that they feel like they are experiencing your program. As a reviewer myself, those are the proposals that resonate deeply with me, because if I still have too many questions, I don't really know what we're funding. If I can't see what the impact is going to be and what it feels like if these kids are going through this after school program, who's actually working with them? Are they trained? Are they doing things that are kind of unique to meet the needs of that community? Have they utilized the feedback and guidance from the community to make sure that this is meeting their specific needs and not just something that's cookie cutter? What are the challenges within that community that exist that maybe make them have to operate a little differently than another organization that might provide similar programming? So just really make sure they feel like they're right there with you. Sometimes it's a local funder you're going for, and sometimes it's national. And if you think about that, even with local funders, they don't know every community, but national funders specifically have no idea about what your community looks like. So if you don't tell them, they have no way to know. Data is important. I know that it's something people don't love necessarily, but it's necessary. Again, data that says the impact your program is having, who you're serving, but also data that tells the story of your community and what that looks like, because all communities are not created equal. I mean, Dion spoke to that, and depending on your zip code, specifically here in St. Louis, that determines so many other factors. And then there are things, like she said, going on alongside that. There can be vacant buildings, there can be drugs, violence, political things. There's so much else that can be happening. We need the data that tells the story. Have a grants management plan. That is so important. And a grants management plan is one that actually says, should we get the funding, this is who will be doing what. This is who will manage the financial aspect. This is how we will make sure that we are managing that financial aspect, what we're going to code, what we're going to how we're going to allocate resources. This is who will focus on the program piece. This is who will oversee the entire project. And again, I won't go into great detail about that because we have done a workshop on that as well. And St. Louis Philanthropic Organization has made sure that they've made all of those available. So going beyond the grant was one of the workshops, and that has a lot of great information. There's also a financial management workshop that was offered that will go through a lot of that in greater detail, as well as resources. So you honestly will have so many resources. I don't even know if you could go through all of them, but they are there at your disposal. Make sure you have adequate staffing. And I say this because people tend to write in, different roles, and they're not thinking about the fact that reviewers are looking at that. So if you have someone who maybe has volunteered with your organization for a long time, they're great, and now you're going after an opportunity, you need a program manager. If they don't have that skill set and that background, that's not the person to put there. That can actually keep you from getting funding opportunities. And I've seen that happen at the federal level, and it didn't matter if the university applied. Anyone can make this mistake. So I want to call that out. Also, make sure you have the right people in place. We talked about the grants management plan. Have the people that have the skill set in place so that when you get the funding, they're able to do it. I've, worked with different types of organizations, and they're large organizations and they still have not been able to manage those grants. And that really causes a lot of problems. So just be intentional as you're thinking about what you're going after for funding opportunities. Do you have the adequate staff in place, or will you have adequate staff in place if awarded? Also, allow enough time. That's a big thing. I saw time management was one of the concerns. Honestly, there's sometimes you're going to have to miss out on the opportunity. That's better than rushing and putting something together and it's not a quality proposal. You haven't thought things through. You don't have all of the components like Deanna and Linda were sharing. There are these different documents that are required. Each funder has requirements. If you're not able to make sure that everything is together and that your application flows according to their request, don't apply. Put it on a funding calendar. Make sure that you follow up and you're prepared for the next time. And we'll speak to something called a grant on the shelf for that. But I would say 4 weeks for a funding opportunity that's foundation. It would be the minimum. I know we don't always know when opportunities are coming, so it may be less, but that's ideal because we have to plan for any and everything. The unknown always happens. I have not had a time yet where we are working with a client and we're writing and something didn't come up unexpected. So if you get it done early, great, but plan that time in. And also plan for if you have a team member who maybe takes a little more, needs a little more encouragement to get things done, plan for that as well. And then also review previous grantees. So who have these funders, provided funding to before? What types of things do they fund? That lets you know if your organization is aligned with the opportunity, but it also lets you know if you are aligned and there's maybe a niche that you have and you see a gap that hasn't been funded, that kind of gives you a leg up and that's something you can really highlight. So just be intentional about that. So avoiding pitfalls, this is just a few other things. I won't go through everything, but I do want to call out, read the fine print. That's important. It's not intentionally there to trip you up, but the things that you see in bold are not necessarily everything that is needed. So make sure you're reading that. And even if it's the same agency you've been funded by before, things change over time. So read it every time. Standard forms, whether it's budget or otherwise, those look different for each organization. So make sure that you're not just submitting what you already have in place. Take the time to actually go through and look at what they are requesting and requiring so you can speak to that. I recommend having a detailed checklist. So as soon as you see that request for proposals, make sure that you outline exactly what it is they're asking you for, including the fine print. Put together a timeline for each person who's working on this. So there should be a team table that says Monique is responsible for getting these documents to us, or responsible for all things evaluation or whatever it is. And here's the deadline for that, our internal deadline. And again, build in extra time for reminders and anything else that you need so that you're able to make it to that deadline and have quality information. Don't underestimate the final review. That's important. Having someone who can look at grammar, who can look at content, make sure that you didn't miss something, because sometimes it can be a lot. Make sure you didn't miss something and make sure it flows. Like if someone else is reading this, is it going to make sense to them? Are they going to be able to follow it? There's so many other things, but like, I do want to call out, like it said up here, it's LOS, LOI, all of that. So LOS is letter of support and LOC is a letter of commitment. If they're asking for a letter of commitment, that is what they are requiring. And a letter of commitment says, if funded, our organization is definitely going to provide this, whether it's resources, space, talent, whatever it is, they are committing to that. So if you provide a letter of support, your application is likely not going to even be considered for funding because it's not what they asked for. A letter of support just says, hey, we got community buy-in from these organizations, which is really great, but it's not the same as a letter of commitment and or any of these others. So just make sure you're paying attention to that. And you guys, there are templates out there for everything. Sometimes they're specific to the funder, sometimes not. But even for us as seasoned, professionals in this space, we have times when we need to research, what template works best. What have other people put in here so we can make sure we're as comprehensive as possible. So you have everything you need at your fingertips. Please utilize your resources. Even non-research organizations are requesting things like bio sketches instead of resumes sometimes. And so make sure you're paying attention. I mean, we recently worked with an organization and they're like, can I submit a resume? No, it's a bio sketch. So make sure you're paying attention to that and following the rules, spacing, all of that kind of stuff, fonts, that matters. So just, you all will be able to see this, but just refer to that when you're making your decisions for how you move forward. And you'll see why there's a lot of time that's needed. The grant on the shelf is really something that is just there ready to go, because like we said, timeline, is not necessarily as friendly, and as predictable. We might see something, there are 2 weeks left. Well, if you already have a grant on the shelf, then you have something. You may need to make modifications, research additional information, but you have most of the fundamental information there. And so what we as a team have moved towards when we're providing technical assistance now is working through utilizing the Missouri Common Grant Application version 2.0. And the reason I say version 2.0 is because it's really honestly amazing, because they have this document, and I'm just going to show it to you all. But they have this document that is phenomenal, and it actually goes, well, if it opens. If it doesn't open, we'll just make sure it's available for you guys. But it goes through all the different components: evaluation, DEI, partnerships, all of that. And it looks like it's not going to do it. So we'll just, we'll go ahead and exit out of there. That's okay. But it goes through all those things. So if you have that completed, it goes through goals, activities, all of that different stuff. If you have that completed, then when opportunities come, you have the majority of the information that you need and you're able to access that. So I just wanted to make sure that you all know that exists. And that's a resource that I want to make sure that we are going to put on the site that you all can easily access for future opportunities. So you have that grant on the shelf and you're equipped. So, oops, I clicked on that again. I'm sorry, you guys. There we go. Okay, so funders, just real quick, there are different types of funders. We all know that, but I just want to make sure that I call that out, or at least the majority of us know that. So that's why I want to call it out. There's federal agencies, which we know exist, and they require a lot. I highly recommend, if you all are going after federal funding opportunities, visit grants.gov. They have a whole YouTube channel that walks you through everything, be as knowledgeable as possible. But also I know there are foundations, such as, St. Louis Philanthropic Organization, and there are others. Make sure that you learn what each of these foundations that align with your mission and your work are committed to funding. Make sure you also make time to connect with them. So there's, some foundations won't allow it, but a lot of foundations want that relationship. They want you to reach out to them, get to know them. They're people. It's not just dollars. It's not just a building. These are people. So relationships are everything. It doesn't guarantee funding, but it does guarantee that they know about your organization. And so as opportunities come up, they're able to share those with you. And, maybe even if it's not through their foundation, they know of someone else who has funding that could support you, or other organizations you could collaborate with. So that's important. And then another type of funding opportunity that I don't think people consider is like the local government agencies. So for instance, we have Children's Service Fund, that's government funding. So make sure that you all are looking to all of the different opportunities that exist. And again, establishing relationships, looking at what they offer, and making sure that there's alignment with your work. It may even just determine how you move forward as you're building out your program, not changing your mission and focus, but just considering all of the different components that need to be included. So breaking down the proposal, I guess before I do that, I want to ask you, do you guys have anything that you would like to share? Any questions, any concerns thus far? No? Okay, well, I will continue to go through then. So statement of need, this is again, like Deanne was sharing, this whole thing will be on the site, so I'm not gonna read it to you. What I wanna do though is let you know that I highlighted certain pieces, because this isn't all that's important. You all have different organizations, different programs, but really calling out those things that are telling. Like when this is saying that, transiency is like 20% higher than the surrounding community, then that tells the story of this is a population that really is in need, and perhaps this funding is now going to be supportive of ensuring that we are, meeting the need of that population, so they're more stable or whatever it is. We need to make sure we're calling that out. If they're not insured, and that's higher than the national average by, I think it's over 40%, that tells us some of those issues of access. And, like we were talking about how zip code is determining what you have at your disposal. And then that determines quality of life and so many other things. So just really being intentional, about calling out the things that make your community unique and the response that your organization is putting in place unique. You may even have some unique collaborations that people haven't thought of, but it's because you operated in direct response to the needs of those in your community. So we're not going to necessarily play with community resources, but I do want to call some out. Again, these are on the site, and so you're able to use them. Typically, we do walk through them. We have so much other information to go through that I wanted to make sure that I just at least called these out. I love Community Commons. Not everybody does, but it is one of those sites where you can go. It's free. You can go there, enter your community, enter a bunch of different information, like just by clicking. You can find out health information, poverty, education, so many other things about that community. So I definitely think you should go there and research it. But this is also on the site. And there's also, oh, of course, I keep going to these sites. I'm sorry, you guys. I have it where I can't click on it, but I'm trying to operate in the interest of time. So we also have the census data. Please do not sleep on this site. There's such a wealth of information, and you can drill down to your specific community and get all types of information. And again, it's simply by just using the filters, clicking on different links and all of that. And then it'll build, just like with Community Commons, which Community Commons uses census and other resources that are reputable. But the census data is, that's very accurate information. So if you can drill down to that level, that'd be great. There's maps that can be produced, tables that you may need for different funding opportunities, depending on their requirements. So just wanted to make sure I remind you of that. And then on the site, there's also additional community resources. So like community health needs assessment reports, which come from hospitals. There's this interactive logic model. So which I know we'll look at a logic model briefly, but there's that where you can work with your team virtually and build this logic model that'll help tell the story, among other resources. And so we're going to now jump into like what goes into a program. Again, some things you all may already know, and some, but we have varying levels. So we're going to make sure that we try to cover the gamut of it. So social determinants of health, I will just quickly say we can go a lot deeper into this. And I will make sure that my team provides some resources on this, even if it's just a video that goes deeper, then we'll provide that. But really making sure that as you're looking at your program, you're not just looking at, oh, we're providing, educational services or we're providing food. Everybody is multidimensional. Like we have all these different dynamics that impact us as human beings, including our mental health and our, financial situation, our housing, what's going on in our community. It's great to suggest that this is what our program is going to do. But if our community isn't safe and we can't get out and do that for our family, then it's not realistic. So looking at all of those aspects and then looking at the fact that no one organization has everything. So identifying what your organization has and then what other organizations may have different supports. And those resources can fill your gaps and you're able to fill theirs. So just really think about how everything is impacting the community members that you're serving. So best practices, they've been shown basically to work. I know we, earlier on, I mentioned that the best practices are something that are really essential when it comes to working with different funders and making sure that they know that your program is one that you consider funding. And so I wanted to share that. And so I'm gonna give you one example of best practices. So I'm gonna stop sharing for just a second. And I just want to show you one example and how you would utilize that to work with your program. So the one I'm going to use is ending the HIV epidemic. And the reason I want to use that one is that I like how they go through each of the different aspects of it. So I'm going to share my screen. So here they're talking about these 4 components that are critical. Diagnose all people with HIV as early as possible. treat people with HIV rapidly and effectively to reach sustained viral suppression, prevent new transmissions by using these interventions, and respond quickly. So then how would your organization use that? Your organization is going to say what you're doing. Or do you have community health workers that are out there in certain areas of the community where people are more at risk for HIV? And so they're, capturing those folks, they're testing them, meeting them where they are. Do you have collaborations with organizations so that you can get people the treatment? They can overcome that barrier of accessing help because you've got a partnership that, with a federally qualified health center or another entity. And so you're able to get them directly into care. Are you making sure that their partners, their friends, those that are in their groups also know how to prevent it and are able to take the medications that are available to them so that they aren't, likely to be infected with HIV? And then what are ways that your organization is responding to outbreaks that may occur? Are you making sure that you're going again to where people are? Are you putting messages out there? And if you can say, I'm aligning with the ending HIV epidemic and speak to each of these 4 pieces and how you're fitting in within that framework, that's something that a funder is looking for. So it's not that you have to recreate the wheel or do something really cumbersome. It's just letting them know you're aligning with what already works. So with that, I will go back to the presentation. But do you guys have any questions about best practices? And if so, just feel free to let me know that. Okay, so I'm going to share. Okay. Okay. So when it comes to program development, I just wanted to share this logic model. And again, you'll probably be able to better see it when you all are looking at it, on the site. But I wanted to share this when we're thinking about programs, developing them, implementing them, evaluating them. We have to consider so many things, and I love this because it does get very descriptive. What are we putting into it? Whether it's staff time, volunteer time, funding, space, equipment, all of that, that's important. What are the different, activities that, are we developing different curricula? Are we developing products? Are we conducting workshops? Are we, who are we meeting? Who are we impacting with this work? Because it's going to look different depending on who we're impacting. And that can be an organization, it can be clients, and we can even drill down to specific types of clients. And so making sure we're looking at that, because that then goes to the impact piece of this. And sometimes we start with the right side of the logic model, where it's like long-term goals that may take 10 years. Where do we want to end up? And we work backwards from there and see what we need to do to get there. So I think that's really important. Short term, we're always looking at increasing things like knowledge and awareness, listening to what people's opinions are, and potentially even reshaping those opinions once they have more information that's going to be beneficial to the work we're doing. Then also we start changing some behaviors. We start changing policies. We know without policy change, there are some things that can't happen. And ultimately we get to that end goal. But we also have these things that you'll see at the bottom here, those assumptions. What are we thinking? Like, okay, if we put this piece in place, this support in place, this is going to impact the community in this way. So thinking about all of those things and having the community that you're serving involved in this conversation is essential. Oftentimes organizations over time have made these decisions and then brought the community in, and that's where we're making mistakes, when we're doing to community instead of with our community. So being intentional about that, and also looking at what's going on around our environment, the political landscape, again, the built environment, how that impacts us. Make sure that we're considering all of that when we're developing or enhancing our program, and then also when we're assessing it, because maybe it's not that our program isn't doing great things. There's a whole COVID pandemic that, broke out. How did that impact us? So let's really make sure that we're intentional about thinking about that. I think it helps us feel better too, as we're running programs. Like sometimes we might feel like we're failing our community, our hearts are committed. We're not failing them, things just changed. So this is an opportunity for us to see what changed and then make some differences in the way that we might approach serving our community. I want to restate, evaluation is an iterative process. I want to state that over and over again. Make sure that it's ongoing, because we can be in the middle of implementing a program and not know that there's an issue if we're not paying attention, but we have an opportunity to correct it if we look at that on an ongoing basis. And then I just like this from the CDC. You guys can look at it later, but it's looking at a series of if-then statements to develop your logic model and to enhance your program. So it's just like, if you have this support, then how does that mean you can serve the community? If you have this space, if you have these people that are involved in this community, that will be, those kind of things will help you determine all these other pieces. And it'll look different for different programs, even if you're serving the same community. So it does take quite a bit of thinking. And so evaluation, which I know people don't always think is fun, but it can be, honestly, and it doesn't have to be cumbersome. It can fit for your organization. I have some examples on another slide that will help with that. But just make sure, like I said, engage the stakeholders from the beginning. That is so important. We can't think of everything. And, you know, there are some factors that we may not even be aware of. And because we did not engage the people that we're serving from the beginning as the experts, we're going to make mistakes and we're not able to serve them at the highest level. And I know that based on what the St. Louis Philanthropic Organization was saying and other foundations, that is essential. When we're looking at, our community and what they need, we're talking about not only the racial equity aspect, but we're talking about accountability. We're talking about being committed. And that means that voice is at the forefront. There's a lot of other information here. I do want to call out one other thing. Ensure that you are using and sharing lessons. So that should let you know alone that nobody does anything perfectly. We can't do anything perfectly. We're going to have hiccups. We're going to learn along the way. We're going to have to adjust, use those lessons to grow, but also share them. We should not have to recreate the wheel. We're not in competition with each other. Share that with other organizations, share that with your community members, and collaborate with each other as much as possible. Make the information public. That's why, as you know, I'm researching and preparing for different workshops. If I come across information, I'm sharing that with you. I'm not going to just hold that knowledge in. So I do want to, call that out. We're going to be developing, if I didn't say that earlier, a one-page or, maybe a little longer document that's going to have clickable icons on it so you can access any additional resources that we've identified through the process of preparing for this. And you can share it widely. The St. Louis Philanthropic has made that available to any and everybody. So I just briefly want to say, it doesn't have to always be a survey that you're doing when it comes to evaluation. Sometimes telling stories is important. Pictures tell the story. There are so many different ways you can do it. And it's okay to get creative as long as you have some type of metric that says we are making an impact. That's what matters the most. You don't have to prescribe to just, the basic options that you've heard of before. Again, looking at those best practices is important. There's more information on the site about evaluation, so that'll be helpful, and we'll provide some updated resources. Going through your statements, I know you really want to make sure that you're describing, what you're going to achieve, how to be achieved, all of that, which we showed through the logic models, but make sure that they're smart, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. There are previous workshops that go through this and break it down in each piece, but I wanted to make sure this time we kind of shortened that. And so you'll see like specifically it's pregnant moms enrolled in our program. We want to be specific about who we're serving. It's not all pregnant moms in the St. Louis area, it's moms enrolled in this program, because then that holds you accountable for what you actually can or cannot do. When we're looking at what's measurable, it's, looking at 30%. We know that that's our baseline. Maybe we get to 50%, but we're saying our baseline is 30%. And I want to challenge you to be realistic about this, because oftentimes we think the funder wants to see that we're going to say it's going to be an 85% success rate. And they even know it's not realistic, depending on what population you're serving and what you're providing. So be realistic about it and make sure that what you're saying you're going to measure makes sense. And then if you exceed that goal, great. But if you're saying you're going to serve 85%, or see an 85% change and it's only 30, that's going to look a lot worse. So just be considerate of that. And then attainable so I have by the end of their first trimester. If you don't see pregnant moms until they are in their second and third trimester, then this isn't something attainable for you. So don't let that be your goal, even if that's the funder's focus. That may not be your opportunity. So just thinking about all of that. And then time bound. So that's pretty self-explanatory, but just, by December 2022 is when we're going to do this. Make sure that you are being very specific, because that also gives you something to work with as an organization as far as your guide. And again, remember, we're working backwards from whatever that end goal is. So racial equity. I really love talking about this. I am not the expert in this, so I will not tell you that I am, but our team does write a lot of grant proposals. And what I do know is that and I'm a community expert, public health expert, this is essential. And the surface approach that's been taken for too long is not okay. So when we're thinking about racial equity, it's both an outcome and a process. And so when, no race is, no race and socioeconomic status impacts their outcomes, then, and everybody's able to thrive, yay, we've met our goal. But that's where we talked about earlier. We're focusing on Black and brown people in our community because that's unfortunately not the case. And then also as a process, we're making sure that those people that are most impacted are the voices that are at the table, driving the process, driving the development of programs, the policies, all of that. Because when it comes to structural racism, which is because maybe not everyone knows, but structural racism, it impacts our health centers, our hospitals, our educational institutions, all of that, because the people who have written the policies and who are putting the programs in place don't necessarily look like those that are being served or come from the community and understand it. And so they're not considering all of the nuances. So I think most of us have seen this. Equality is not the same as equity. We really want to focus on equity. We have to focus on equity because not everybody has the same, just saying we're giving, 50 pounds of food to everyone doesn't, mean the same thing. There are other nuances that are impacting people in their ability to access that food, for example. And so we need to adjust to what that individual or that family's needs are. And that may mean that they need transportation or they need food delivered to their home. They don't just need to know that food is available to them. But I also want to go a little bit deeper than that. So when we're looking at racial equity throughout our organizations and you're responding to these funders who are asking if you really want to set yourself apart, and honestly, you just want to be the best organization you can be at the end of the day, then it's important that we are thinking about racial equity even through policies that are in place. So your organizational practices. One thing I use as an example often is HR. So there are policies in place for PTO or for hours that people can work. But if you're a senior level executive, your situation is quite different from someone who is maybe an hourly employee that has to take several means of transportation to get there. They have to drop their kids off at daycare early in the morning just to make it there. And their hours, aren't necessarily traditional. Maybe they can't use their PTO because they just decide they don't feel well that day. They have to go to work regardless. Making those policies more flexible is important. And one of the latest things that I've started speaking to is even thinking about the insurance. A senior level executive may be able to pay for their insurance with no problem. But why shouldn't the hourly employee be able to have theirs paid for and have access to the same insurance? Why are we working in an organization where we both have access to this health insurance, but one can afford it and one can't? If they can't afford it, and especially if you're a larger organization, if we're talking about equity, make sure that you're providing that support for them. So it goes much, much deeper than just a one-day training. And again, that's a whole nother topic, but just wanted to at least get you all thinking about that. And again, this is just another layer of that. Representation should occur at all levels. And so I love this resource from Change the Story that, this framework, because, people we're serving, we should see them represented at our board level. We should see them represented in our senior leadership, our mid-level management, and, all throughout the organization. That's when it's not just about, do we have five more Black people in our organization than we had before? It's, are they represented at all levels? Are they represented in the data that we're collecting? Because that drives the work that we're doing. But if their voices aren't a part of it, then we're missing something. So again, that's just an overview, but it gets you thinking about how deep we really need to go when we're talking about racial equity. I wanted to call this out. It's just it's an example. It's a resource I came across. And again, this is really for like the larger organizations. Any organization can get there, but just realizing that, starting to have things like this work certification where they're looking at very specific aspects of your organization and determining that you really are ensuring that Black equity is a part of your organization, that's huge. And when you're talking about funding, this is directly aligned with that. Because if a funder is seeing like, whoa, they're really serious, they've gone to this depth, they didn't just skate in, you can't skate into this program. You really have to demonstrate that you're committed to this. And there are other things, other options like this, but this is an example. If you can do that, that really sets the bar high. So that's it for racial equity at this point for me, but does anyone have any extra commentary they want to share or any questions?
You know, Monique, I just want to say, because I believe Jennifer talked about removing the fence and that one visual, and that is actually a conversation that is going on about that particular visual in overall, because people are saying that, wow, that visual looks nice, that barrier is the fence. And if you can remove that fence, that you would create greater equity. And so I do know that there are conversations not only locally, but across the country about that very thing.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much. That's super impactful and helpful and necessary, and I need to update that. So thank you. Just want to stress the power of collaboration. I'm not going to go into great detail, but just want to say, again, no one organization can do it alone. This is not a deficit, it's just the reality. So identify those organizations that either are doing similar work and you all collaborating can, move further, but also, and impact more people. And that's great for a funder. They want to know that if I'm giving you money, not only are you impacting this community, now other people have access to these resources with that same amount of funding. And so it's a greater scale. So I know St. Louis can tend to be, again, a competitive community. We really do operate best when we work together. And if there's a gap in what I'm providing as an organization and another organization is able to fill that gap, let's do that, because at the end of the day, it's not about us and our egos, it's about our community members and how we can best serve them. And so let's make sure that we are looking at the landscape. I have a resource that I'll provide for you all. Many of you may have seen it through the Clark Family Foundation. They have these different maps of organizations under different aspects, whether it's workforce, education, abilities, and all that. And not everything is fully built out, but you're able to connect and see like what organizations are doing in our community and potentially find some alignment there. And again, it's all about relationships. So don't just, I do want to say this, it's so important to not just say, oh, I'm going after this funding opportunity, and so now I'd like to partner with you. It's about relationships, and relationships take time to build. And so, and it needs to be genuine and intentional. And so, and having buy-in to the community, there might be gatekeepers for the community. Respect that. That shouldn't be frustrating. That should be, something that you work towards because your heart is really committed to it and committed to this community, as was shared by Dion earlier. That commitment goes a long way. And also don't just look at it for what your organization can get out of it. Always think about what you can give to other organizations. Think about too, for that foundation, what benefit do they have as you being a part of their portfolio? So, it's just, let's always think not only about ourselves, but outside of ourselves. Additional things to consider, there's so much more that we can consider outside of that, because it's not just about the grants. It really is about other things that are going on in our community. Since we have talked about things in the Going Beyond the Grant workshop, I won't go into this in too much detail, but I do want you all to know that it's really about, there are some changes, as we know, that have happened without me getting political. There are things that have happened in our community in recent months that have really changed the game. Make sure you're paying attention to the landscape of your community, because that's also going to drive what your program looks like, what you can do at that point in time, and maybe what you need to ask for funding for that you may not have asked for previously. And then budget. So that's an important part of this. The St. Louis Philanthropic Organization requires an organizational budget as well as a program budget. And so this is just a very, very, very basic example of a project budget. There, again, on the site are templates, there are videos, all of that to help you. And then there was a financial workshop, or I believe 2 of them. So you all are able to go back and look at that as well to better help you. I mean, there's a spreadsheet that goes through all different types of budgets, and you all can get an idea for what should be included. But this is just an example of, you want to be descriptive of exactly what the funding is going towards. If you're, getting books, this is how much it costs, and this is how many of them you're getting. You're paying, $1,200 in stipends for instructors. this is how much it is per hour, and this is how many hours they're going to be working and what they're going to be doing during that time. The foundation, wherever foundation you're applying to, should know how you're spending their money. And then organizational budget is your operating budget that is required, and that kind of looks at what your last year's revenues, target revenues were, any categories that you've analyzed, and you also increase based on like what you're forecasting. You should be looking at, again, that data to see what your community is needing, and are you seeing more in one area versus another where you're saying we might need to increase our budget in this line item. That's something you take into account. And then again, those economic factors, we know that's impacted us. I think, less than ever before do I need to really explain that, because we've all felt it and seen it. So just really taking into account how that impacts your ability to move and where you might need to put more support. And that's overall as an organization. So that is those like indirect costs, the overhead costs for space, for the equipment that is used, all of that you're considering here. Also for your program specifically, that project, that's where we get back to the example that I shared, where it may be that you have teachers that are providing, education. That's going to be specific to that program. You may have equipment specific to that program, not just the general items that the entire organization uses. It also makes, you really want to look at the activities that you have going on. And while your program is not going to essentially change your mission and your work and all of that doesn't change, you may have some new activities that you are incorporating because that's responsive to the community. Make sure you're aligning that with your company's goals and you're calling that out in this project budget. So those new activities will require different resources, different resources, not only financially, but actually different resources. It may be books, it may be different equipment, different staff. And so just make sure you're thinking through all of those pieces. This is just an example of a resource for tracking when we're thinking about that grants management side of it, tracking your different receipts, your budget. There's a whole slew of information on the site about pricing, and then I believe even like video to walk you through understanding it better. Open project. I mean, I think we've heard of all kinds of things, Asana, all of that. There's different ways to track the work. And I just want to call that out because we're not always using these. And it's important because when we're trying to track multiple grants, multiple people working across different projects, it's really essential to have a system in place that we're using. Some are free, some have low cost, some cost more. It's really going to be based on what your organization feels is going to work best for you. But doing that holds people accountable, and it also helps we're busy. It helps us be able to see where things are at any point in time so that we can maybe speed some things up. We can see what's causing trouble or challenges at different points and be able to nip that in the bud. And it also helps us when we're managing that grant. There's reports that, as Dion and Linda were sharing, there's reports that are due for all funders. So when we are looking at when that deadline is, we can work backwards and say, well, we need different team members to get us different things. And I know that having managed grants before, it's really important to build in a lot of time, just like we talked about with writing the proposal, build in that time to get information from people, to have the, process in place for what that looks like, because people are, they mean well, but life happens unexpectedly. Sometimes we get overwhelmed with other work projects, anything else can happen. So just build in extra time for them to get what you need so that you can be responsive to your funder, because you don't want to be considered out of compliance, lose your opportunity to potentially get funding with them again. And honestly, there are other funders that ask about your funding history. And so if they see that you haven't been compliant with another funder, that can impact their desire to fund you as well. Vetting a grant writer. So I don't expect you all to read this, but this is one of the documents that we are going to be providing. I created this because I had people coming to me and asking different things like, can we write a grant writer into our grant? No, it's not ethical. And so if they're telling you can do that, that's a problem. But also making sure that you get a grant writer that produces quality. I saw some of the responses from the survey, and it's like there are people who are waiting till the last minute. That's never acceptable. We already talked about the timeline, that you should have someone who is willing to set up a timeline that's going to work for you, that's going to consider all of these different aspects. And so I just wanted to make sure that I provided something that goes through that. And so I think the next list, this has a checklist on it. So look at their experience with program development. In the past, a grant writer was like, hey, we give them this information, they write and go from there. as we said, it's competitive now. The field is very competitive. You need someone who can do more than write. They need to be able to understand program development, because if something is missing, so when we're looking at those best practices, they need to either be able to ask very specific questions and say, we need this specific information, we need these specific roles in place, whatever it is, so that they can write a quality proposal, or they need to be able to identify it for you. I know a lot of times for our team, we end up doing that work because not everyone understands what is needed. So make sure that you have grant writers who understand what a fully built out program looks like. That will impact your ability to get funding every time if people have too many questions and it's unclear. Success rates. That's really, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, they shouldn't have had success. Don't get me wrong, but we can't say what's your success rate anymore because of the fact that there are so many other factors now. There are best practices, there's evaluation requirements. The field is just much more diverse in what is required for you to get funding opportunities. There are major institutions, whether it's nonprofits or universities, that don't get funded. And it's not because it wasn't a great proposal, it's just a competitive field. So really what you're looking at is the quality of the types of proposals that they've written. Have they written foundation proposals that align with the types of foundations you're going after? Have they written federal grants if you're asking for that? And then looking at if they weren't successful, again, that doesn't mean it was a bad proposal, but why were those proposals rejected? And oftentimes you get that information, but there are times you don't. But asking those questions, it's okay too to ask for, they may say yes, they may say no, but it's okay to ask for samples of their writing. And with that, they can, remove any identifying information and all of that. But it's okay because you want to know what you're getting. What's the quality of the content? So we want to know, do they have a great amount of information that really clearly describes everything and flows and connects? Also grammar, you want to see what their writing level is like. But I also want to say on both ends, so there's two non-disclosure agreements work well for both. If you're asking for that, be prepared to sign a non-disclosure agreement that says I'm solely looking at this for the purpose of determining if this is going to be a good fit for us. And then you do not use it outside of that. That is a legally binding agreement. Also, they may ask you, and I say that because we ask this, sometimes we need more information because organizations, and again, it does not matter their size, how long they've been around, they think they have more than what they do. And so we ask for the information and documents that they have so we can review it and we can say, oh yeah, okay, you've got everything. Or we can say, hey, before we give you a scope of work, we're noticing that you don't have these pieces. Do you have someone else who can do this? Or did you not share that with us? Or is this something our team is going to need to be able to do? And so for that, we are always willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement because we want that organization to know that we just want to make the best decision before moving forward. And any grant writer that's not open to that, I wouldn't trust them because there are people, unfortunately, we can't trust that take your information and use it for other means. Also make sure to check credentials. And that's going to look very different. Some people are going to have certifications. Some people may have like I mentioned, having public health background that, has provided them the opportunity to be able to develop, programs and tell the story and conduct the research that's necessary and all that. But also don't be afraid to check references. Like that is more than fair. They can say they've worked with certain organizations. Have they really? Because I'll be honest, there are some people who have been a member of a team that has worked with an organization and they have provided maybe some support to them. There's a lot of inflation of ability that is being shared out there. So people are inflating what they've done, what their expertise looks like, and you've got to protect yourself. So if they just played a supporting role, it's not that it wasn't important, but they may not be the person to actually write your grant. And so just make sure that you're checking all of that because there are some people that are saying they're really great at grant writing. They're even teaching classes now, and they're not good writers. So do your due diligence. There's a little more information in that document. It has links you can click so that it's not just the Monique opinion. There's research behind that, and you can delve a little deeper. And then people wanted to know about identifying funding opportunities. I'll make sure that these are available on the site, but there are so many different options out there. One is GrantWatch, and that's where you can look at so many different funding opportunities. You can filter it based on different topics, based on your different states that maybe you work with agencies in different states and provide support to them. You can filter it based on that. And so I really love them. And instrumental is another one that's really great. And, a lot of these do offer the option to try it for free, but there are costs associated. So I just want to share that as well. And I have a source, actually there's a resource that we're going to provide that has multiple different types of funding agencies and entities that you can, or excuse me, entities that you can look at to identify funding opportunities. And so it's also not exhaustive, but it gives you more than what I'm providing here so that you can consider that. I also wanted to say to think about the library. That's something that not everyone thinks about. So you can book a librarian, and that gives you, and you let them know what you're specifically looking for. You actually have the opportunity, I don't know if they're still doing it virtual or not, but you have the opportunity to sit down with the librarian who will know all these different databases that they have access to and can help you filter and identify funding opportunities as well. That's a free resource. Take advantage of it. And while I have St. Louis County here, I believe the St. Louis Public Library, as well as St. Charles County Library, offer similar support. So consider that. Your tax dollars are going towards it. You might as well. Additional just little tips as far as identifying funding opportunities. Sign up and follow funders that represent your organization's interests. So if you know that there are different foundations out there that you're interested in, follow them so that you know if funding opportunities come available. Follow them so that you're able to keep up on the stories that are being shared about their different grantees or about the different work that they may be engaged in outside of solely providing funding and all of that. So that's one key way. And then just different keyword searches. Sometimes it's about just getting creative, honestly. Looking at all, sometimes you can fund your entire program, but sometimes you need to fund different aspects of your program. Sometimes you need to call out specific populations that you're serving. So just really thinking about doing that keyword search. Nothing alone is going to get you everything, but if you have all of these different tools in your tool belt, I believe you're going to be super successful in identifying funding opportunities that fit for you. And remember, don't chase the funding. Don't change your organization's focus. Stay stable and go after funding opportunities that really align with your mission, your work, and specifically your community. I think that's all I have at this point. So it's, the floor is open. Anything that Linda wants to share, or if anyone has questions and follow up, please use this time. And feedback. I always welcome feedback.
Sure, I'll just add a couple of things that I wrote down here real quick. With the need statement, I would ask you guys to think about painting a picture, because understand that some of our board members may not have a good understanding or a good feel for what your particular program is, or the services that are needed and the needs that are represented by the people that you're serving. So helping to paint a picture so that they can better understand the issue and the problems is always helpful. It's like writing it so that they know nothing about you and what is it you think that they really need to know. And while that sounds basic and intuitive, I am actually a community reviewer for a local funder, and we are reading proposals right now. And it's very interesting how some of them still don't really paint a good picture of the issue or the needs that are being challenging by for the population that's being served, or they are put it in context of what the agency needs to do versus what's really happening with the population being served. And that's really, really important. I would also like to reiterate the issue around grammar and typos. Most funders can and do look past that, but at the same time, if there's too many in the system in your proposal, it gets to be distracting. I just read a proposal where there are typos and issues from the page 1 to the end of the proposal. And so it gets to be a little distracting, because you begin to wonder whether or not they rushed it, if they just kind of did it at the last minute, or there's some real capacity issues with the organization there. So I would just say, be mindful that as you're doing your proposal, that you pay attention to that. And we also recognize that not every agency is going to be able to hire a grant writer, and there may be some smaller, more grassroots community-based organizations that are doing, you're like the Jacks and Jackie of all trades, because you have to do everything. And we recognize that. But at the same time, if you want to get someone else, a friend, a colleague, someone to sort of just read it and just kind of draw your attention to some things that may not be clear, that can also always be helpful. There was one question that Monique touched upon about program support versus operating support. That is very tricky for a lot of funders, even for this board. I would recommend that you look at maybe presenting it as program support or program operating support. And I know sometimes it's just the terminology, because a lot of funders look at, well, they're asking me to keep, monies for the rent or for the lights. Well, those are important operational factors, because you need to be able to pay your rent, you need your lights, you need your gas in order to do the program. But at the same time, those are also could be attributed to the program itself. And so sometimes just thinking about how you present that to someone can really make a difference. So I would just say, think about program support or program operating support versus general operating. And sometimes it could be a little bit more palatable for some funders to digest that. The last thing I will also say is, when you're talking about your organization, particularly in the need statement or in the outcome statement, and you say many or several, it really doesn't tell us anything. There are many people need this report, or several people are being impacted. Well, I always say, well, so what? What's many? What's several? Is that 50? Is that 100? Is that 200? Have some number, some indication in there to kind of give them a sense of how broad or how deep the issue is, or how many people actually need your program. What is the demand for your program? Lastly, I would say, don't be afraid to talk about what didn't work. When you talk about outcomes in your proposal, some people will say, well, everybody was successful in meeting the results. That's fine. What is that? What does that mean? How many people reached their goals? What were those goals? What were those outcomes? What actually changed? But if they didn't meet their goals, that's fine too. That's why evaluation is very important, to say, what didn't happen? Why didn't it happen? What did you learn? And what are you going to do differently? That shows that you are really paying attention to the program, that you're learning and that you're growing, and you're going to do something different, and that you're evolving, and that's okay. So I would say to please be comfortable in just seeing and being upfront about what doesn't work and why, and then what you're going to do differently, because it's easier to put that up front versus to be able to back into that a little later. Okay, I think Maggie has a question. I see. So that's this. Okay, I'm sorry. That's a thumbs up. Okay, but also just be mindful of that, because evaluation is a very powerful tool. And I know someone mentioned earlier that it's a little challenging, a little scary. Yes, it is, but it's also a necessary aspect of the organization's growth, and for you all to be able to develop and understand what's working, what's not working, and adaptability and what you need to do next.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Linda. I really appreciate that, because that is so important. And hopefully you guys are seeing just the specific information, as clear as you can be, is going to be the best. I saw a lot of the information in the chat, and that was really awesome. And just also know that you all do have your areas of expertise. So, just know that, and because you're doing the work. So I do want to encourage you to kind of lean into yourself more and trust yourself to be able to tell that story, dig into those very personal experiences that you and or your team have had with community members that we wouldn't know. That like I said, we're human. So touch that heart, make sure that you're telling that story that really is going to resonate. And give yourselves grace. Look at all of the information you have before you, utilize those resources. It doesn't matter if you've never written a grant before. We all started there. You can do it. And like Linda said, if you don't have a grant writer, you have other people in your life that can review the information and give you feedback. Because I'll be honest with you, a lot of times reviewers aren't in the field. They're not grant writers. Even at the federal level, we have people who've never written a grant before, but they bring a certain lens to it to the conversation that's invaluable. So just, trust yourselves. You're going to be amazing. Utilize Linda's expertise as you're looking at the Philanthropic Organization's responsive grant opportunity. And then I just want to pull up this slide real quick so that you guys see just the next steps, and we'll close out from there. But of course, if anyone ends up having something to share in between time, feel free. So this is the site. I know Linda put the link in there, and I know she'll share again. She always follows up with everyone with that. And then the recording from this will be on that site, as well as the additional resources that we'll be providing. I need a little bit of time to pull that together, but we will be providing those for you all. I would say the beginning of the year, so like maybe second week of January at the latest. We'll have that document that has all of those different resources, if not sooner. And then the next steps. So the grant that Linda mentioned and shared with you all is going to be due February 3rd. Okay, yep, at 4:30 p.m. in hand, hard copy, 3 of those. So 1 original, 2 copies, but you only need documentation, 1 documentation of the supporting required documents. And then in spring 2023, there are going to be 2 workshops that's forthcoming information, but one is focused on human resources, and then the other is on organizational change management. So keep an eye out for that. And is there anything else, Linda?
Yes, I would just say there will be a survey going out to evaluate this workshop. We would ask you guys to please give us the feedback on that, because we're using that to evaluate our capacity building program overall. There will also be a survey going out on those 2 topics, human resources as well as change management, because we want to make sure that we really customize those workshops to what issues and challenges and information that you need. So that's going to help feed and build out those 2 workshops. I would ask you all to take a look at that and to keep that on top of mind, so that, and please respond to that. I will also share that the board is really taking a hard look at capacity building and what that means for organizations. And they want to dig deeper, which is really exciting for us, because it's really one thing for our board to say, okay, here's some money to do these workshops, but to actually own the process and own the results and want to really see the impact and see your agencies grow, I think is really great. And so we will be doing some follow-up to the organizations beginning with this workshop, actually. Well, we may follow up with you like 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line to see how it went, to see how you're applying what you're learning, things of that nature. So see that the board is going to really be making some additional changes to the capacity building program. And like I said, really beginning to grow it and to go deeper with it. And so just look for emails throughout the year from us. And when you get those, please respond, because it is very helpful in helping the board understand what they're doing with the dollars and how it's improving and impacting your organization.
Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I really appreciate you. I know that Linda and Dion appreciate you participating. Look forward to you all just continuing the wonderful work that you're doing. And thank you again. Have a great day. Have good holidays.
You guys have a great day on purpose. Happy holidays.